The fishing news is brought to you by Interlux Marine Paint, Fanatics of Ocean City, Maxima Fishing Line, and Okuma.
Well, summer is officially underway. You know how I know that? The greenheads have arrived. I'm Jim Hutchinson with a New Jersey, Delaware Bay edition of the Fisherman magazine. Summer solstice, greenheads, crowded causeways, and of course, Mako Sharks. We've had a pretty good run of Mako so far in June. In fact, the Mako Mania tournament was held this past weekend. A little bit sporty conditions, but the guys did okay. Congratulations to the crew of the Lockout. They took first place for a 301-pound Mako brought to the scales. We'll have that picture in next week's edition of the Fisherman magazine. It's our July edition of the Fisherman, so make sure you pick that one up. Second place here was Tin Knocker. You folks who read the Fisherman magazine on a regular basis recognize this name. Frequent contributor to our offshore reports, Captain John, and the Tin Knocker took a 271-pound Mako at Mako Mania. Don't forget, you've got Mako Fever out of Manasquan this weekend. That tournament was supposed to be held this past weekend, but they postponed it until this weekend. By the time you view this, you've probably already left the captain's meeting. You might already have a day of fishing under your belt. Good luck if you're fishing in this tournament. I mentioned the reports, reading the Fisherman magazine. You subscribers, don't forget you've got access online, all access to all of our other editions, the Long Island edition and the New England edition. Why don't you go in and log in to check out the Long Island edition. This week's cover features a 730-pound Mako Shark. That one was brought into the Star Island Shark Tournament over the weekend. So there's definitely some monsters offshore. And if you check in to our Facebook page, you'll find out there's some monsters inshore as well. Trenton's Chris Martin was 3 miles off of Asbury Park over the weekend, hooked up with this juvenile white shark. In fact, I checked in with the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife, and by this photo, they believe that this one is a juvenile white. Now, Chris had been out days earlier looking for striped bass and got a couple of runoffs and a couple of lost fish and lost lines, so he figured maybe it's a shark. Went out the next day with live bunker, and caught this juvenile great white shark that, of course, they didn't bring aboard, they released. We're also finding out in the reports this week, we're hearing of some blue sharks and threshers in Ambrose. So those sharks are definitely inshore to celebrate the 2016 Summer of Sharks. We are finding out about the browns or the sandbars. And of course, the sand tigers are in close as well. Philip Herrera tangled with this 30-pound sand tiger up in Great Kills over the weekend. We're finding out more and more about these inshore sharks. Again, the July edition, check it out. We've got something on inshore sharking and also the surf sharking. Now, this week's cover, you subscribers, you know about this week's cover, the 55-inch striped bass that Mike Vertoli caught just a couple of weeks ago, jigging off of Seaside. Well, we're finding out this week that big striper bite, it's still the best bet right now off of Sandy Hook. I got a couple of guys called me this week, said the fish were just going crazy, aggressively feeding on bunker, so the live lining is going to work. But make sure you take out some of those surface plugs, those poppers, and those pencils. Definitely a good time to throw into those bunker schools as these bass are hot, again, looking off of Sandy Hook. Parker Pete, congratulations to the crew of Parker Pete's out of Belmar. They hooked up with the biggest striper to date for them, 52 pounds. Irwin here caught this one on one of the trips on Parker Pete's boat. That was off Spring Lake Heights just last week. So again, make sure you're set up for live lining. Make sure you're set up for dragon wire as well. If you don't find those hot schools, make sure you're able to put a spoon down to get into those big striped bass. Now, the party boats are starting to focus your attention on bluefish, which is great, just like years before. In fact, the big Jamaica was out bluefishing earlier this week. We got a report of a 57-pound striper that was caught on that party boat as well. So the action is underway. If you're looking for some of those smaller stripers, those residents, the back bays, they're starting to heat up a little bit. Herb Moore was out with his young son Trey just the other day. Trey was throwing his favorite, a Gags Grabber, top water plug in the Navasink, hooked up with one of these small stripers. There's still shots of stripers along the front beaches. You surf casters, dunking clams or chunks of bunker. If you're going to throw plugs, dawn and dusk, definitely the time to do it. A popular way of fishing for striped bass down along the Delaware coast, and I'm surprised more guys don't do it in New Jersey, is drifting an unweighted sand flea along the rock piles. Kyle Miller here did that in Indian River, checked in with Old Inlet Bait and Tackle. Sand crabs, unweighted, floated right along the jetty rocks, along the inlets, or along the groins. Good way of picking up some stripers. I know, guys, in the past, one of the old art forms that has been kind of lost is raking up some calico crabs, especially those soft calicos in the Jersey summer surf. Always a good way of getting a couple of those resident stripers that are in there. Now, the drum bite that we had hot and heavy off of Brigantine, Andy at Riptide Bait and Tackle tells me that latest full moon seems to be moving those fish a little farther north. Johnny here checked in with a Riptide rodder. He caught this black drum on the beach of Brigantine earlier in the week, but we've also found out that a couple of those black drum are being registered along the front side beaches of LBI as well. So they'll continue to move to the north. Now, congratulations, big surprise to CJ and Joey here, who registered the first cobia of the 2016 season. They were dunking clams in a South Jersey surf when they tangled with this fish that brought it into Two Chums Bait and Tackle. We made reference of the fact that the cobia closure in federal waters north of Florida is in place as of June 1st. But right now, there's no plan. This is great, thanks to the states. No plans right now to shut off our coastal waters. So right now, you're still able to tangle with those cobia and bring them home if you catch them inside of 3 miles. If you're outside of 3 miles, not so much. Fluking is picking up. We're finding out about that. Some bigger fish being reported. Peggy DeFranco was on her and her husband's 18-foot Garvey in Myers Hole earlier in the week. Caught a nice 6-pounder that was behind Barnegat Inlet. And it seems like the ladies rule because Piscataway's Carlin also checked in. She earned second place up on the Raritan in the John McCormick tournament. She caught this 9.3-pounder. That was on a stinger hook, a trailer hook on her jig. Congratulations, Karen. Finding out some of these deep water structures, the snags, the artificial reefs, they're holding fish. Bob and Randy said Cape May Reef has been producing. They brought in these fish to Sterling Harbor Bait and Tackle, so it might be time to start getting in on those reef sites to take a look at some of these fluking grounds. Now, speaking of the reefs, if you checked in with us with a Monday bulletin, the New Jersey Artificial Reef Program is kick-started. 2 deposits just last week at the Ocean City Reef and also the Atlantic City Reef, where the Richard Reyna wreck was deposited. That's several miles offshore in New Jersey. But we've got the full story over at thefisherman.com. And again, the July edition of the Fisherman magazine will have the full report on New Jersey's Artificial Reef Program. One last thought, the offshore season is definitely underway. It's time to book those trips. Checked in with Adam at the Canyon Runner this week. Had 240 yellowfin and 50 bluefin in 6 trips. 6 days of fishing. So offshore fishing is definitely heating up. It's time to start thinking about those trips to the edge, looking for yellowfin, maybe some bigeye, and of course those bluefin while they're in. I want you to go check out thefisherman.com for all the reports right now. But until next week when we see you again, catch them up, my friends, and have a great weekend.
The fishing news is brought to you by Intellux Marine Paint, Fanatics of Ocean City, Maxima Fishing Line, and Okuma.